Yaakov Katz is a senior columnist at the Jerusalem Post and a senior fellow at the Jewish People Policy Institute. Welcome back. Good to see you.
Thank you, John.
So the timing is notable. The executive order sanctioning the Israeli settlers announced the same day Joe Biden campaigned in Michigan, said before, home to a large Arab American community, and where many are angry over Biden's support for Israel in this war with Hamas. In recent weeks, Biden has faced repeated hecklers like this one in Virginia.
Jill and I had a chance to sit down.
Biden is in a close race for re-election against Donald Trump. His close embrace of Israel is costing him support among some key groups, the young voters especially. But is it too simple to dismiss these sanctions as being driven by domestic politics in the US?
Look, we have a problem here over recent years. There is such a thing as settler violence. It does exist. However, John, it is nothing compared to the moral equivalency that the White House tried to draw out yesterday by issuing the executive order and imposing sanctions on Israelis. All of these cases are under investigation by Israel. There is a rule of law. There is a justice system in Israel. One of the people who was sanctioned is actually in Israeli prison as we speak. So this whole idea that the president and the White House tried to do at a time that Israel is fighting a war, I don't want to say existential, but it is one of the most important wars in our history against a barbaric Hamas terrorist group that has massacred over 1,000 Israelis. And now, because of a few cases of violence in the West Bank, which exist, this is going to make a moral equivalency. It's wrong, and I think that it is about American politics. Michigan is a swing state. It is a state that Biden could potentially lose if that large Arab percentage of residents of the state do not come out to vote for him. Not that they would vote for Trump, but they just would not vote. And that could be the what would determine the outcome of the upcoming presidential election. So he's nervous, and that's what this really is about.
Okay, we should listen a little more from the U.S. State Department on the reasons for the sanctions.
President Biden and Secretary Blinken have been clear that the levels of violence we have seen in the West Bank over the past few months are unacceptable. Violence in the West Bank surged to alarming levels in 2023. This includes unprecedented levels of violence by Israeli extremist settlers targeting Palestinians and their property, as well as violence by Palestinian extremist militants against Israeli civilians.
It is also noticeable that for now, the two far-right anti-Arab bigots holding senior cabinet positions within the Israeli government will not be sanctioned. But should they? Itamar Ben-Gvir, Minister for National Security, has encouraged attacks on Palestinians.
I am not going to tolerate, and I have zero tolerance, John, for any violence against anyone, and whether it's perpetrated by Israelis or perpetrated by someone else. And I'm also no big fan of Bezalel Smotrich or Itamar Ben-Gvir for that matter. However, again, what we're seeing here is an attempt to draw a line and make some sort of balance between what's happening in the West Bank, which is a sporadic, small, fringe group of people who sometimes, unfortunately, take the law into their hands. I mean, John, whether you're in Atlanta or in Chicago, how much crime there is on the streets sometimes of cities across the United States. This is unfortunately sometimes a political-driven criminal acts that we see throughout the West Bank, but it's not state-run. It's not something that requires sanctions. Hamas, on the other hand, that's a terrorist group that runs a state like in Gaza. These are things that are completely uncomparable.
Okay, Homeland Security Secretary Alejandro Mayorkas, though, isn't out there encouraging attacks on illegal immigrants. But I want you one more point here. Also unprecedented, the U.S. Secretary of State is asking for options, and this is related to the sanctions, asking for options on recognizing a Palestinian state. Axios reporter, CNN analyst Barik Ravid is hearing this from his sources, adding that the fact the State Department is even considering such option signals a shift in thinking within the Biden administration on possible Palestinian statehood recognition. It's both sensitive internationally and domestically. Here's the response from the administration. We've made quite clear publicly that we support the establishment of an independent Palestinian state because we do believe that it's the best way to bring about lasting peace, security for Israel, for Palestinians and for the region. Noting this, there's been no change in policy. No policy change yet. And it may not happen. But something is happening here, it seems, with the relationship between Israel and the United States. It seems there is a frustration within the administration about the actions either taken or not taken by Benjamin Netanyahu when it comes to simple things like not simple things, but demands to scale back the military offensive in Jerusalem, demands to sort of scale back the violence in the West Bank by Israeli settlers, which is being encouraged by cabinet ministers. So that's what we're getting to. There does seem to be a change here from Washington's point of view in dealing with Jerusalem.
There is definitely a change, and the change stems from a frustration, I think, that is more than just a bit of violence and sporadic violence that we see in the West Bank. What's really at the core here is a frustration with Israel's leader, with Prime Minister Netanyahu, who is not outlining at all, John, a vision of what will happen the day after this war in Gaza, right? Israel is working to take down Hamas. Now, you would expect a responsible leadership to then outline, okay, once this is achieved, hopefully, what comes next? What is the new rule that is going to be a governing entity inside Gaza? Now, it should be the Palestinian Authority, and it should be a process that then leads to the Palestinian independence that we've been hearing about for 35, 40 years. But Prime Minister Netanyahu won't have any of that. He doesn't talk about that. He's not willing to outline that vision. And that causes severe frustration between our friends, and particularly those in the United States. That's a problem, especially when we need the U.S. support to continue to fight this war and for the challenges that might be on the horizon, whether against Hezbollah in Lebanon or Iran. That, I think, is what's really at the center of what we're seeing. And for the time being, this is a tactical move, what we saw with the executive order and the sanctions against those extremist settlers.
Because at the end of the day, what it's coming down to is that Benjamin Netanyahu's future essentially relies on keeping his cabinet together, which means denying a Palestinian state and continuing the war in Gaza until the end, right?
Prime Minister Netanyahu is trying to balance a bunch of different things, or keeping a bunch of balls in the air at the same time in an amazing juggling act that I don't know is possible. On the one hand, to keep fighting in Gaza, on the other hand, to keep working with the Americans, and on the other hand, to keep his coalition together, right? For example, right now, there's talk of another hostage swap and a release that would get back Israeli hostages. Parts of his coalition, the people you mentioned before, Smotrich and Ben Gvir, are saying, we're not going to agree to the release of Palestinian prisoners and those numbers to get back our people. Netanyahu wants the deal. So what's he going to do? Is he going to go for it and risk his coalition? Is he not going to go for it? I think, John, at the end of the day, we can agree that responsible leadership, they need to take risks. And it's not about politics right now. Israel is facing a conflict that really will determine the future of the security of this country and potentially the region. It's not time for politics. It's time for leadership that can preserve and create a safe and secure Israel, and by large, a safer and more secure Middle East.
Maybe Benjamin Netanyahu needs to get the memo. Yaakov Katz in Jerusalem. Thank you, sir.
Thank you.